You've probably heard of the iconic words of Timothy Leary when he talks about finding the others. Well, in this episode, Be Mythical co founder Jonathan Wilkinson and I dive deep into exploring what was meant by the others. What's the role of the others, or what we might describe as true community, for those of us on the path of the soul in service of our own individuation and union? How can we find the others? How will we know our role in relationship with the others? These are all questions that we journeyed deep with and did what we could in the time that we had to answer in this episode. And I'll say now that if you are feeling any call into a true community of the others, you will love our community, our academy, our mystery school, Unio. You can find out all about it at bemythical.com/Unio now. So I'm dropping that in so you can come back to it when you finish listening to this episode and you are ready to find the others. Let's dive in. Hello, Jonathan. Welcome back once again to the show.
Why, hello there, Lian. It is wonderful to be back once again.
Yes, and we are now, I think this is our third show together in 2024, I believe. And so they are, as we keep saying, we're going to start doing these more regularly. And I believe we are keeping our word and we are indeed doing them much more regularly.
We are indeed, yes.
So we were just talking about this beautiful topic of community, kinship, finding the others, as Timothy Leary said. And for me, it brought to mind that very quote that "find the others" is taken from. And it feels to me like that's a really beautiful place if we start with those words and see what they evoke, because I think there's a lot in them, a lot of depth, a lot of invitation into relating to ourselves that aligns with, I believe, what we're going to talk about today. So shall I begin there?
Let's do it.
Okay. Admit it. You aren't like them. You're not even close. You may occasionally dress yourself up as one of them, watch the same mindless television shows as they do, maybe even eat the same fast food sometimes. But it seems that the more you try to fit in, the more you feel like an outsider, watching the normal people as they go about their automatic existences. For every time you say club passwords like, "Have a nice day," and "Weather's awful today, huh?" you yearn inside to say forbidden things like, "Tell me something that makes you cry." What do you think deja vu is for? Face it, you even want to talk to that girl in the elevator. But what if that girl in the elevator and the balding man who walks past your cubicle at work are thinking the same thing? Who knows what you might learn from taking a chance on a conversation with a stranger? Everyone carries a piece of the puzzle. Nobody comes into your life by mere coincidence. Trust your instincts. Do the unexpected. Find the others. And again, that's a very evocative quote by Timothy Leary. What's that saying to you? What's that bring up for you?
It says a lot. What I was feeling was I was just feeling that how that's been the case pretty much since the dawn of time for us humans who are relational beings, and it has been a challenge for us in many ways since the dawn of time, but then just really appreciating the context of, particularly when I was talking to someone walking past in the office in the cubicle and asking those questions, and just really again being brought to how alien this whole experience of life we currently have in this new world. And when Timothy Leary wrote that was some years ago. Things have only really, let's face it, got more intense, got even more sped up, even more disconnected, even more confusion that is there. And so I just was really struck by this very ancient rite of passage, which is to find our kin, to find our soul family, to find ourselves, to find our way in this life, and to come together in community, in this beautiful alchemical mix that is what so much of what we've come here for has been birthed from. And yeah, again, in this new world, what we can be so cut off from. And so, yeah, those were certainly the feelings that it evoked for me. What about yourself?
Can I just ask at the beginning there, you said something like, this is me paraphrasing, almost like this is the age old challenge or problem, you said something along those lines at the beginning. And I was curious because I think it could be seen that this is only a modern day problem, as in, when we look at much more ancient ways of life or ancient ways of being in community, to a large extent, we were born, we look back in those times, you're like, oh my goodness, to be born in a true community, where you never need to go looking. Your community's right there. And yet, I would love to know what was coming up for you. And you're saying, like, this is an age old problem. Like, why is it, if we were up until, very modern times, really, we were born into a community? What did you mean by that?
I think there's a few layers for that, but probably the most prominent one was that even within, let's say, an indigenous lifeway, an indigenous tribe, even within that tribe, as beautiful, as synergistic, as symbiotic, as much of that would represent a true synarchy of a community, we're still in relationship to people within that. We're still trying to find those that are, let's say, more deeply aligned with us from moment to moment. It was more just appreciating, let's say, the times of war. The one thing, which we know has virtually always been present. There's been war, there's been conflict, even within the tribes, outside of the tribes. There's been just so many unfoldings that we are called to try and find ourselves or discern between what's aligned for us. And it's that level of discernment which clearly has got more challenging over the years, but I was still kind of transported and feeling into, even in those age-old settings, there were still these energetics playing out to some extent, just nowhere near to the extent of what they are now.
Yes, that makes sense. And what I will answer your question in a moment in terms of what it evokes for me, but what's just come up for me as we're journeying into this is, of course, true community is one of all kinds of beings. It's certainly, with other humans, but it's also going to be with all kinds of other beings, elements, spirits, whatever you want to name them. And I think probably, I'd love to check in with you if you agree. I think primarily in this episode, we're going to focus on those human relationships within community, albeit recognizing this is happening in that wider context of a community of like many kinds of beings. Would you agree?
I would.
So coming back to your question, what did that evoke for me? The part that really actually is only as I go back to it, it's like moving me to tears. Those questions that he gives as an example, like, what is deja vu for? They are the questions that, questions like those, maybe not that exact one, but probably that exact one, that I feel like, when we were talking in an episode ago about those kind of like tells of an old soul, those for me, like that kind of conversation, those kind of questions that we're journeying with that feel so important, so important. Those for me are things that I've spent my life journeying with, largely alone. And for me, that is like that thing that really has been so um enlivening, powerful, connecting, and serving on my journey to find a community of people who are asking those kind of questions, who are interested in those conversations. That's what really, and as I was, because he obviously brings it so to life, this idea that you're kind of like at your work, there's even that notion of the word cubicle. We don't really use that so much as far as I have known in the UK, but we know what it means. And I'm transported back to my old life, my own old work in a corporate setting where it would be like the word he uses, forbidden, completely forbidden to go to a co-worker like, what's deja vu for? Um, and yet that's the juxtaposition, isn't it? Like, this idea of community in our modern culture is like people who just happen to live in the same town or just happen to be the people who you work with. And I think when we recognize like the kinds of conversations, the kind of questions, the kinds of endeavors, the kinds of quests that we're on, and the people that we can be with, like be in those things with, that is the community we're talking about. That's what he means when he says find the others, is the people that we can connect with there.
Yeah, the people where we can, what I can really feel when you're saying that is where we can find the depth of what our soul is deeply aching and longing for, because the picture that's really presented there is that shallow and hollow and very much surface layer, superficial existence, really, that kinking and contorting oneself into whatever the shape or form that we feel we need to be in. And then there's just that in those pockets of time, and also being in the corporate world and feeling that that ache and that just sheer resistance in my body, in my mind, to where I find myself, and that just deep longing for to feel something that's true, to feel something that's deep, to feel something that helps me remember who I am and why I'm here. It's those real evoking energies that are those deep calls that I can really feel in that, and in what you were sharing. And again, that I'm sure anyone listening who works in the corporate world, I mean, hey, businesses are different, but the majority, I think, will somewhat painfully be intimately familiar with that.
Absolutely. The Yeah, there's so much. I feel like I could dive in there, but I want to take it somewhere else. The notion of like depth versus those kind of club cut passwords. I think particularly being an autistic person, and as you know, my life's work Gene Key is all about depth. It's sometimes called the well, wisdom well, depth. This idea of like this bottomless well, and so those those that juxtaposition between depth versus, like, for me, that real struggle to know the club passwords, to say the club passwords in the way that they're meant to be said, that elicit, the right response for that password. There's just so much. I could probably spend a whole episode like in that, but I'm going to pull myself out because one of the things that I find particularly interesting, for those of us that are on that conscious path of what we might call it, individuation, union, coming home to our own selves and to God, those of us that are on that path, the form our relationships and our community are going to take, what we need, what we're going to what's going to be aligned for us, absolutely shifts and change, and perhaps has a different purpose as we go deeper on that path. And I think, given that's the work we do, that's really the broader context of even why we're having this conversation. I think it'd be really interesting to talk specifically about the role of community, but also the role of community at different stages perhaps along that path. And I'm appreciating it's not like we've had a pre-agreed, it's not like we've defined this is very much in the moment, just to anyone listening, we haven't agreed what these stages are. But I'd love to hear your sense on that.
Yeah, and just to say, yeah, that's very much our intention, to just kind of show up in this space and see what wants to come through, and also help with the consistency. And yeah, what I felt was, what I got a vision of was almost like a hockey stick moment in terms of growth, that where having been someone who's spent many decades deeply in this journey, it was when I really found my kin. It's when I really found my people and was able to integrate myself into this, the alchemy, the absolute potency of the magic, the life force energy that comes in that unification, that things took off. And it's not like there wasn't, huge growth in many areas that was doing on my own before, but it was only when I experienced that things really shifted. And that is something that we see time and time again in everyone we work with, and just so many people we bump into and meet, that when they really find their kin, they find their soul family, they find their community, both in terms of to receive from, but also to give from in service, that beautiful symbiotic relationship, their whole being and body just comes alive and comes home. And it's a journey. It's not like that's an instant thing. Of course, coming into community then provides all the wonderful material for liberation that triggers their hell out of their shadows. But that's it. It's like you are just suddenly in that crucible, in that melting pot that only really can come from such an energetic coming together. And yeah, it really does. Yeah, it is kind of just strap up. I'm feeling like in that rocket for many, not all, I must say. Everyone has their own journey, but it gets intense in a lot of beautiful ways and challenging ways. But really, it's what we're here for. It is that perfection, and yeah, I can really feel that in what you were sharing.
Yeah, you use the word alchemy, and there's something so I keep going to say a word and thinking like that's not it, because it's kind of all of those words. I'm just going to use the word powerful for the moment. There is something so powerful in that conscious understanding of how we can be in community. And in these relationships with all these different types of people, where we're going to be projecting aspects of ourselves on them, and so that we can be in that conscious, like reclaiming them, loving them back. And that's something that, again, we I think quite a long time ago started to really see, like, if we are going to be doing this work, both our own work, but this work with other people, the most powerful way we can do that is by creating these intentional communities, these groups of people, these circles, so that can provide that, even the very word we use, crucible, is very intentional. It is a crucible for alchemy. That is, in anyone listening, if you're not aware, going back to the kind of more literal meaning of alchemy, i.e. that dissolving of different materials and then bringing them back into another material, i.e. lead to gold. The place it happens, the container it happens in, is a crucible. So our intent, like our choosing of that word crucible, was to indicate, that's what's happening, that very alchemy. And there is, it's not to say there is like that is the only way, but I would say certainly what we've seen, for those of us in this modern world who are on this path, it's almost like, why wouldn't you choose? What we've seen is like one of the most accessible, powerful, beautiful, enlivening ways to allow that alchemy, which ultimately is internal, but it is again so powerfully done in community when we get the opportunity to see really clearly, like, oh, that's that part of me that I'm projecting out. There's that part of me being projected out. Is there something like, again, you use the analogy of kind of like this like rocket. It's like there is like that provides the rocket fuel for that, doesn't it?
It really does. And that part you were speaking to there is one of the fundamental things of this, because sometimes you can just bring a load of people together and it could just be one hell of a mess without those real core pillars and tenets that we speak to a lot, which is honoring the sacred. You know, when you honor the sacred, you will approach it with reverence. You will hopefully approach it with sovereignty, with discernment, because that, like you were just bringing alive that energy, like without elevation, without sovereignty, because the great challenge, of course, we face, or just about everyone faces in this modern world at least, is the fact that we haven't had healthy, synergistic, symbiotic communities modeled to us. And so sometimes when people come together without the right, let's say, elevation or energetics to it, invited, baked into it, should I say, it can, I mean, it's going to get messy anyway, but without that, it's going to be very challenging. So I think you really kind of opened up the energetics there, but also that really allows us to bring in, well, what actually allows someone to work with that material for liberation in a way that is serving for the greater good, for themselves, for the community, for that real classic win-win. And that, it's almost like you can have that, and then the work starts, and then all of the other things come to the fore, which is, obviously is, a big one.
So I think this leads nicely to this this question of who is our community? Is there just one community? Do we have different communities that serve different purposes? I think that would be really helpful because, again, if we, for most of human history, to a large extent, our community was our community. It was kind of like we may well have different relationships, different energetics, different dynamics within a community, but to a large extent, our community was our community. Whereas here we are in this modern world. And firstly, there very much is a much more of a requirement for us to consciously choose to create and be in community. Is not going to, I mean, yes, there is going to be that kind of, to some extent, a kind of unconscious, just like, here is your community that you can decide to be in or not, as in, again, your geographical community or the community of people you work with. But for those of us, and I guess there's a point where we do need to kind of specify, like, what we're talking about here really only applies to people who do see themselves as being on the path in the great work. Otherwise, we're just going to keep having to make those distinctions. If you are one of those people, likely you are going to need to be in that conscious choosing of the communities that you create, join, be part of, and how you interact with them. And it likely will be more than one. Love to hear your sense on that.
Yeah, that's one it's just challenge after challenge, really. But the next challenge, as you spoke to, is the with this modern world, is it's like we can have many types of connections, of communities, of coming together, of souls in many shapes and forms, and that is part of the challenge that continues to dilute our awareness, dilute our attention, and continues to create these shallow and hollow experiences. And so this is where having that level of discernment over where am I actually being called to place my energy? Where am I actually prioritizing? Am I actually prioritizing spending more time on my phone, on social media, than actually being of service to a community, or receiving what is aligned for me from a community? And I say that because for so many of us in this modern world, we are so swept up in these cycles of consumption and output that we're so innocently, it's so rare that we actually get to kind of pause and reflect and think, and hang on, what have I just prioritized in my day? And if we can really stand back for a moment and fully appreciate how fundamental the energy of a community is to us, to let's face it, the world, to Earth itself, and how we prioritize our actions each day in service of that, it would make a massive difference. It wouldn't make it easy, because then we have to bump up against our addictions, the things that, when we are living in a sped up world, the things that actually seem to soothe us, although they do kind of continue to perpetuate the motion itself. And so it's a real challenge, because we are, and I think this is something we do come back to quite a bit, which is really important. We're not advocating going back in time and trying to completely recreate what was. We are of this time for a good reason. We chose, I believe, to come into this body and this world at this time to meet these challenges. And in some shape or form, that is going to be embracing technology. That is going to be having a community that is potentially online as well as offline, and being able to find that harmony with them. But boy, is that a challenge for us. And it is such a deeply personal journey. But just, again, for me, just starting there and just really seeing, okay, how have I spent my time this week? What have I prioritized? What is my intention? What is the North Star that my soul is calling me into? And how have I aligned my actions with them? Will start to help illuminate that. But yeah, it's a tricky one. It's one you and I are constantly juggling and feeling into, and being humbled by consistently, aren't we?
Absolutely. What was just coming to mind for me was the way that you very much talked about the challenges that we are in this modern world, and this absolutely isn't to um, deny and dismiss those challenges, or to make wrong the ways that, as you're saying, there is a place for understanding. There's going to sometimes be this kind of like numbing and soothing types of behavior that show up, like ultimately we're all likely to need to work with these wounded inner children within us, that whilst we're not consciously engaged in that, sometimes we'll be in these kind of like soothing, numbing behaviors, and that is just the nature of things. And again, there are kind of like different types of communities and different types of roles we'll play in these communities, that does seem to be, for most of us, vital as we're on this path. And what came to mind was last night, my husband Chris and I, we're in the hot tub actually, and we were just like, there's a really great place where we just like everything's off the table. You haven't got any technology, anything really around you apart from the garden. And then we sit and have these like really kind of like deep conversations that perhaps otherwise we wouldn't have. And so last night, as you know, he's starting a new job on Monday, and we were in this conversation about, for him, that's another community. And so he was talking about his intentions, about kind of how he's going to approach that, what he wants to create. And really, again, that word intention, I think, is such an important one when we are, again, in this, in the great work. Our intention, what we're intending to create, what we're intending to bring, what we're intending to heal, what we're intending to see, so important. Anyway, so he was in that contemplation of, as he steps into this new role, into this new community, what he intends to bring to it. And then it made me think back now years ago, when I was about to begin my shamanic initiation stroke training. I was stepping into a new community there. And I remember, and I'm pretty sure you and I spoke about this, having this very clear intention. This for me is me stepping into a community in a different role to one I've inhabited for a long time, where I'm not going to be there as a leader or teacher. I'm there very much as a kind of student and peer and, fellow journeyer with these people. And I very clearly set that intention. And I remember I'd forgotten about it, because now this is years ago. And as we were in that conversation last night, I was like, oh, yes. I can really remember that was an intention, a role that I brought to that community that allowed me to experience things that, had I had a different intention, or indeed no intention, um, likely I wouldn't have had the experiences that I had, that I now look back and see, oh my goodness, they were so aligned, so medicinal, so just, so catalyzing all the things. And they came from it being a particular kind of community, one where I was stepping in as a student and as a peer, with that intention that I would journey with that community in that way. And there's, of course, different communities and different roles. And of course, those of us who are here as old souls to be our medicine, that is going to be something that, like, all the time we're going to be kind of like shape shifting, being different in different communities, different kinds of communities, like I've got a call for different aspects of ourselves. Anyway, I'm going to hand over to you, because I'd love to know what that evokes in you.
Quite a lot. There's roles came up in that, but I remember that time very vividly, very well, as like you said, it was a real calling in for you to open and receive, and to keep, as you know, that wasn't just a choice at the beginning. That was a continuation throughout that 3 to 4 year experience of really opening and vulnerably revealing and receiving, and that alchemy and that role, or the many roles that was coming from that. I was just really appreciating the complexity in that, and the challenge, again, because people listening who come into communities, it can be really challenging to vulnerably show up and open and reveal ourselves to the community, to be able to ask from an open-hearted way for what we deeply long for, what we need. And because what happens so much in this modern world, because those spaces and those energies aren't there, that tends to come out in a projection, in a pedestalizing of others, in a trigger, and where the more we can just be with the truth of what we feel in our body and be able to cleanly express that and have that be received, that's pretty much some of the deepest healing there is. And there again lies a real challenge of being able to keep coming back, feeling dropped, feeling what comes up for you, and that process, that cycle that eventually evolves into that material to liberation, to create a set and setting that really supports all, that is a true symbiotic relationship. I mean, that's ultimately, that's at the heart. And when a big challenge for that we face is the amount of variables we have to deal with each day. And when we come into community where those amount of actions get spread, well, what happens at the moment is we live in these, like I said, lots of, I'll say there's the family pocket. There's some people may live on their own. There'll be all these different, I was thinking of Chris, of how many jobs he's had and how many communities he's gone into. And then it's almost like this wake, like the ship at the back of him, of all these kind of other communities that are there. Like, that's, unless you was a wanderer in the past, most people would not have experienced that. And so it's almost like, yes, we're trying to approach this to create the community that we deeply long for, but we're also being with these sort of fragmented communities that are kind of still there. It's a really interesting thing to journey with, but ultimately it's calling us into what needs to die. So what is being calling to be birthed can kind of come into fruition. And it doesn't mean, therefore, everything needs to die, but it's just, that's part of what we've chosen to come here with. It's like, you can't maintain all those communities, even for a manifesting generator like you, Lian. I don't think that's even possible. Certainly isn't for a projector like me. And yeah, just again, really deeply appreciating of what that's calling for us, what's that's calling out of us, how that's going to deeply serve us. And as we said, this is a topic that we're going to be coming back to speak to, because there's lots of really layers to this to go deeper and much more into the how-tos. But that is again, just what really opened up for me with the complexity of there and what we're really being called in to be with and to manage in this modern world. And bless all of us for that.
Yes, my goodness, we are unbelievably already starting to journey towards the end of this episode, and there's just so many other places we can go. So certainly, as you say, this is going to be an ongoing conversation, and certainly something that we'll also be questing more deeply into in Unio, which we'll probably talk a bit more about that in a moment. But there's a couple of things that really struck me as you were talking. One is, again, coming back to likelihood is many of the people listening to this show are in some way kind of change workers, healers, coaches themselves. And so one of their roles is to be their medicine, to serve their medicine to others. And I think the reason this is especially helpful to look at through this lens of community is that this disconnected modern way of being has us, really, it's a really odd thing where we're kind of like trained to be very individualistic and yet completely unaware of individuation. We're simultaneously like so unconsciously codependent and like interwired with everyone around us, whilst not really having any notion of like interdependence and kind of like what that entails. So it's a really interesting kind of mixed bag that we're in. And then for those of us that are here as those change workers, because again we're being trained into this very like individual way of being, we're thinking, okay, so I need to be this person who creates an audience, and it's kind of like all me just kind of like pushing my message onto people. And how do I market, how do I attract people? And I think there's something, and again, not at all like demonizing that, not making it wrong, not to say even that there's some aspects that aren't helpful, and yet I think there's something really medicinal in itself to start to look at this back again. Well, like what's true for us as humans, and has been true for us as humans as far back as humans go. It is that we belong together in community, and that doesn't suddenly vanish and change when it comes to us serving our medicine, us being change workers. For that to be something that is deeply serving, deeply true, deeply nourishing, that would suggest that also needs to happen within a community, not this idea of a performer and an audience. And so, of course, we've got the archetype of, say, for example, the shaman or the medicine man or woman. That happens, that serving of that person's medicine happens to their community, with their community, in this like mutually beneficial exchange of energy, of gifts, of blessings, of needs. And I think that's something really helpful for us to like recognize. If we keep looking at everything through this lens of, which of course social media is like compounding this idea of my followers, my fans, but if we can kind of like just go, hang on, this is ultimately about me and my community of fellow souls. What does that evoke? What does that elicit? What does that call for? Including, of course, again, going back to what we're just saying, it doesn't mean, say, for example, that, if we're in a conscious community that we've chosen into, in which we are, going back to my example of being, when I did my shamanic training, my role in that community was as a peer, as a student. I wasn't there to serve my medicine, although of course, there's a part of being our medicine where we're always our medicine. But in terms of the archetypal role I was playing, it wasn't for me to serve my medicine. It requires me, and obviously in conjunction with you, to create a different community for me to serve my medicine too. But knowing that is really helpful. Knowing that's what's being called for. It would be completely inappropriate for me to be, for example, in my shamanic circle, trying to stuff my medicine down their throat. what's called for is to me to recognize, oh, there is a community of people who my medicine is a match for. Who are they? What's going on for them? What's being called for between me and them in terms of that community that we are going to co-create?
Yes. There's a real pattern of people who naturally have a lot of influence. So those medicinal ones, those old souls who have a lot of influence, it's very easy for them to create connections, to create community. But what tends to happen is quite often they rarely find themselves in a community where they are peers, where there are people that can really, really help them come alive. Because take nothing away from those people, and again, this is deeply personal. I'm not saying this is the case for all, but what can happen for those influential people is they can be clear about what they need to serve, and they can create this community, and they can meet them. But it's almost like they're really still missing that element that you were speaking to there of having something of a peer. Now, ideally, we would have one community, and that one community would serve all. But in this set of fragmented communities that we find ourselves, it can be really helpful to be aware of, where am I receiving here? Because if there isn't any receiving for you in a community, chances are there's something off there. And that isn't that therefore means it's not aligned for you to create a community in which you serve. It's just to be really important to be aware of, where am I receiving from community? Where am I being met? Where's the mirror for me? Where is someone maybe calling out or inviting me? Where is someone letting me know what they sense and feel that I can't at the moment, because of the speed, the rate that I am churning at, the speed that I am serving at? And I really felt that deeply within you, which is a challenge. It is a challenge for highly influential people to find a community and a space of which they don't feel like everyone's looking to them, where actually they feel they can look to other people and be held by other people. It's a really, again, it's a real challenge in this modern day, and one that is really essential. And I felt that deeply in what you were sharing then with regards to that shamanic training.
So as we move towards a close for now, what would you say about what we are kind of like in that? Again, for us, it's very much this ongoing conversation between us and our community in terms of Unio specifically. Do you want to share some of like what's going on for us, what we're creating, what we're offering, how we're serving, specifically from this lens of everything we've been talking about?
Sure. Well, take this month's quest alone, which is about slowing down. And that is at the heart of everything that most people face in this modern world. Most. There are clearly exceptions to that. And there are ways in which we can journey on our own. We can have these quests to slow down, but when we come together in community, there is a potentiating energy, an amplifying energy that comes together. And we know we just in the 3-4 quests we've done already, what happens when there's a collective group going together in such a way with a shared, at least
even for us personally.
Exactly. I think both of us can say that we have been initiated and humbled in as powerful ways as we've ever had through creating this alchemy.
It's been so surprising, hasn't it? Sorry to take off track, but I think I can't emphasize enough. Like, it's been mind-blowing for us personally, embarking on the very quest we're inviting students into, what we've ended up discovering, experiencing ourselves has been so beyond what we were anticipating. It's just been like, as you say, this year has been a roller coaster, and so clearly we could kind of map the roller coaster to the quests in Unio, couldn't we? It's just
We
been
so
like,
can.
what on earth? I mean, that would
It's just
take some time to go into some examples, but even like last month, which was all around death and life, my goodness, like the way death very literally was showing up for both of us. And we didn't know that going in. I'm like, my goodness. Anyway, back to you. But I just wanted to say that because
no, no,
we're not
yeah.
sitting here just saying, oh, yes, it's been, a journey for us too. Like, oh my gosh, has it been a journey?
And there's that beautiful coming together of excitement and terror or fear. Like that is usually a good marker and really shows can show that you're in the deep work, and that has certainly been the case. And the slowing down one, the quest we're in at the moment, is really one of the most challenging things we all face in this modern world, and to do that on our own is just so much more challenging than to do that in community, because if we're going to slow down again, we need to somehow let go of some things. We need to experience boredom so we can pierce that threshold to our creativity, to all these things that we don't get. And as someone, just speaking personally, who has, I can be very much a hermit and do lots of journeys on my own, and they can be incredibly powerful, but they do not come close to what happens when we come together in community with that shared intention, that vision, and we journey together openly and vulnerably, revealing with honor, with reverence, with just deep appreciation for what we have chosen for ourselves and how we meet each other. It changes everything. Again, that doesn't take away the being with yourself, but knowing that you have the community to come back to from your journey, from that sitting out ceremony with your tree, from that vision quest, from that whatever else it may be that you've experienced, from just the excruciating pain of turning your phone off or not going on social media, whatever it is, when we can feel that collectiveness. Because, well, really, I'll just briefly touch on this, like appreciating that as children, we're all not narcissists. We all like experience that it's us. And when we've not grown up in a community, we carry this forward into life. And so until we come into community, that can actually be realized that, oh, shit, I've been carrying all this. I've been taking responsibility for this myself. I've been holding this burden. I've been clenched. I've been closed. And it's in that liberation. It's in that allowing that evidence to inform our confidence, those parts of ourselves, that safety officer, those parts that's really protected us over the years, are able to suddenly start to experience something different that informs an illumination that takes us away from what was. Like that alchemy is just what comes up time and time again in Unio when we journey, and there is very few, if any, alternatives that I'm aware of that. And so, yeah, we could touch much more, but that's just for me what comes up just thinking about our current journey with slowing down. But yeah, I'd love to know, if we have a little bit of time left, what comes up for you.
It was what came up was going back to the way that each of us will like bring different things to a community, like different roles, different archetypes, different unique soul paths, different medicine, and how we just, it's something incredible. Like, as well as what I was talking about earlier in terms of the way that we kind of project these parts of ourselves, these hidden parts of ourselves, on people, either consciously or unconsciously. What I was also seeing, and this brings us really nicely back to where we began with the that Timothy Leary quote. I'm just going to read that last part because this is what really just stood out to me. It's a bit like here's what I prepared earlier, isn't it? This wasn't, I didn't plan to come back to it in this way, but it is what is arising. I'm struggling to find the window. Bear with me. So it's this part that really, really stands out to me. Who knows what you might learn from taking a chance in a conversation with a stranger? Everyone carries a piece of the puzzle. No one comes into your life by mere coincidence. Trust your instincts, do the unexpected, find the others. And just one tiny example. This month, one of the members of Unio sent me something that just suddenly illuminated this whole part of my path that just I hadn't seen in this way before. And it's given me this like gift of like, oh, these symbols are like now just like glistening, illuminated in a way that if she hadn't sent me that thing, I wouldn't have come across. And then me seeing that thing has now allowed me to illuminate that for other people, which has then kind of like shown up in a different way for them. But it all came from this idea that each one of us brought this other part of the puzzle. And I wrote a post earlier talking about how different different traditions, systems provide these like portals and lenses and mirrors, ultimately to allow us to see those symbols that are those breadcrumbs that we can find and follow on that path home to ourselves and to God. And that is something that I don't think words can even express, come close to the genius interweaving of each of our souls and our destiny, and these like just beautiful little pieces of treasure that we can offer each other when we come together in community.
Yes.
So anything you would like to say in closing? Of course, like absolutely anyone listening, do come join us in a Unio to benefit from all of the things that we've been talking about here. And the link for that is bemythical.com/Unio. We've got a ceremony just coming up. It may even be tomorrow, depending on when this goes out, but it'll be very, very soon after this comes out. And my goodness, you'd be so welcome to join us in community. And the particular piece of puzzle that you bring. Anything you would like to say in closing as well, Jonathan?
I think it first starts with really being honest with oneself as to what it is that's missing in terms of what we're not receiving, what maybe we're not giving in service from love, and to really calling guidance from spirit, from your tree, from whatever that is, to for you to really open up to those moments. When you was rereading the last bit of the Timothy Leary quote, then I was struck by talk about things that make you cry. I often go and find things deliberately that make me cry and open my heart. And yesterday was no no difference. I watched a Thai commercial, and in Thailand they have just the most incredible commercials that just end up just bursting you open. And this one particular one was this young man, and it showed him going about his daily life, deeply, openly immersed and connected to all. Like, it helped this lady with her street food cart up the curb. He would give his food to the dog, and you would see these people watching him do it, and they'd shake their head, because they was kind of caught up in that matrix of, oh, we're wasting their time. And it really, and he would give some money to someone who was on the streets, this mother and daughter, and it said for education, and he would keep giving money, and then eventually it tied it all together so beautifully, where it showed what is possible from really opening to what's in front of you. And even though right now a lot of you may feel there is no community in front of you, there are people all around you. When you walk in the street, they're there. And just like it said, I think it said, nobody comes into your life by mere coincidence. Trust your instincts. Do the unexpected. Find the others. Instead of that, I for such and such a reason, I can't find that community or that thing. Just meet whatever is in front of your life with as much openness and as love and as deep service as possible. And that will return. And of course, there is wonderful communities like Unio, should it feel aligned, to come and join us. But I just want to kind of finish on that real simple humanness, that humility, that thing that we're so sped up in this modern world that we feel so disconnected from. Those little moments in life are really everything when it comes to us coming home to what really matters to ourselves, to love, to service, to receiving, to all of that. So a little bit more than what I was intending to say, but that's what wanted to be spoken in closing.
Wonderful. Well, as ever, it has been a pleasure, Jonathan, to co-create with you. And thank you to listeners for listening. We'll be back again, hopefully in the next month or so with whatever we're going to explore together next. But for now, I think that's us complete.
That does. Feels complete for now. Thank you. Honor and a pleasure, as always.
I very much hope you enjoyed watching that. And if you did and you're not already subscribed, then do hit that bell thingy and subscribe to automatically get each fresh new episode as it's released each week. If you'd like to find out more about the work we do at Be Mythical to guide and support old souls in this new world to live their own unique myth, do hop along to bemythical.com and you'll find out all the ways you can join us and go deeper with us on your own mythical journey. Lots of love for now. Mwah. See you again next week.